Jenny Wilson, Democratic candidate for the U.S. Senate seat from Utah. Thank you so much for being part of 3 Questions.
Yeah, thank you, Bob.
There are 10 Republican candidates that are vying for the seat being left vacant by the retirement of Senator Orrin Hatch, and you are one of 4 Democratic candidates in the race for that seat. Regardless of how many candidates are in this race, do you really view this race as between you and Mitt Romney?
Well, I do, but there's an interesting kind of twist going on within the Republican Party nomination process right now. So I suppose anything can happen. We're doing things differently this Senate race. You know, we have the option of going to our conventions, and we have the option of going direct ballot if we get signatures. So all of us are choosing, you know, one of those options, or some are choosing both. So until we actually get through convention at the end of April, it's not going to be so clear.
What about Mitchell Weiss and the other 2 Democratic candidates? What do you know about them, and what do you have any kind of a strategy to win the nomination of your party?
Well, my strategy is just get my message out. I'm a 5th-generation Utahn. I'm a longtime Democrat. I was involved with politics from day one, not by choice. My father was an elected, Ted Wilson, mayor of Salt Lake City in the 70s to the 80s.
So it's in your DNA.
Yeah, well, I'm one of these kids that got, you know, to go with Dad to do things on the political stump and go down to City Hall, and so I guess it's in my blood. I'm the only one in the family that sort of kind of really gotten into it and been elected, so I guess I'm following Dad's footsteps. But I've worked for candidates. I was the chief of staff to Bill Orton, a Democrat from Utah, that many know, in the 90s, and you know, I've been to every convention, so I feel like I'm in a really good position with the delegates to remind them of the work that I've done on the Salt Lake County Council and throughout the years.
All of the polls indicate that you are leading the other Democratic candidates, and all of the polls also indicate that Mitt Romney is leading all of the Republican candidates. In light of the fact that he has been a governor, he has run for the presidency twice now, I mean, that must give you some kind of pause at the outset, but I can't believe that you don't have some kind of strategy wherein you gain more votes than he does in this race. What is that strategy?
Well, I jumped into the race some time ago, and I did it not knowing, I did not have a crystal ball, no one did, that Mitt Romney would show an interest and actually file for office. So the reason I ran was I'm frustrated with a lot of things that are happening within the state. I love this state. I'm raising 2 boys here in this state with my husband. And I have felt that the all-Republican delegation needs a different voice, that a Democrat could speak to the other side of the aisle and put Utah first. And that's who I am. That's who Bill Orton was. And so I jumped in feeling that we needed to have a different conversation. So whether it's Mitt Romney, had it been Hatch, I don't know that my message changes much. What's interesting is this is not a typical year. We've seen, you know, the Me Too movement, women stepping up even prior to that, after the Trump election. We have Donald Trump as president, and there's nothing typical about that. So with that, I'm just taking this one day at a time. I'm out on the campaign trail, doing my thing, and we'll just deal with it when Mitt's the nominee and I'm the nominee. We'll meet then, and we'll go from there.
Do you see a scenario in which you beat Mitt Romney in this race?
I mean, it's clear that the polling will show Mitt with a strong lead. This is a Republican state. He is a well-known Republican. He's run for president twice. I've done none of those things, right? But I serve the community. I'm an elected official. I serve 1/3 of the state. I'm in the weeds on policy issues. There's no question I know this state better than Mitt Romney, and I'm willing to talk about things that I know are on people's minds. As I tour the state, I don't ask the question, are you a Republican, are you a Democrat? I ask, what is it you're thinking about? What are the concerns in your family? And people are saying, this opioid crisis is devastating my own family, or I just lost my job because I worked in a coal mine, or I like what's going on here in Salt Lake County or Davis County or Utah County, but I love the quality of life that I have here now, and I'm fearful that it will change. And I think I have answers for those questions. So I think this will be an issue-focused debate. I worked for Mitt Romney. I will enjoy a conversation. I would enjoy dozens of debates if he's willing to do that. And I think I have a lot to offer.
Is there a common theme that you're finding that most people are concerned about?
Well, I hear our governor, who I respect, and others say, we're doing so well as a state. Look at our economy. Look how diverse our economy is. We need to bottle it and show the rest of the world. Well, I would question that. I do know, having served, and I continue to serve as a Salt Lake County elected, that our Wasatch Front economy is doing pretty well. In fact, our challenge there is growth. How do we manage our growth? And how will we deal with these cyclical ups and downs with our economy and do it well? But I know that many of our counties are experiencing negative job growth. So what I'm really hearing most often, at least with the people I talk to, is we're not doing so well. And got a tweet the other day from a woman who is in Utah County, who's already done her taxes looking forward, and was surprised to see she's not getting much out of this tax bill that was passed. And I have concerns about that. So I think what I understand is, you know, I'm a mother, I'm connecting with people, I'm really trying to get to the root of what is on their minds. And it's not always the fairy tale that we often hear. And the opioid crisis is very much affecting us, and there are other issues of concern as well. Suicide, of course. I'm really happy to see more focus on that from the legislature, from the governor, and there are many issues we've been working at the local level that I think are really important for us to address.
There are at least 3 counties in Utah wherein the economies seem to be shrinking.
Yeah.
As a U.S. Senator, what would you do to turn that tide around?
Well, I think one of the advantages of me seeking this office is I've worked for the federal government. I worked for Congress. I spent a little bit of time at the legislature one session in a staff capacity. I've been a long-term county elected. So the continuum from the federal government down to the state to the local government is very, very important. And we have that with transportation. But then I think it's sort of hit and miss. And I want the federal government to do better, to be more responsive to our needs and not so bloated. So I think there are a lot of opportunities at shrinking the federal government, applying the federal government's reach to good programs, and trying to find a better way that we can actually get the concerns of citizens in Utah better met.
What would you say is Mitt Romney's biggest weakness in this race?
I think Mitt's biggest weakness is he doesn't know this state. I worked with him at the Olympic Games. He did a great job. I really enjoyed the interaction. I think people look back to 2002 and say, wow, that was wonderful. But it's 2018. He's at the sunset of his career for most people. I think that's a weakness. I think just not really maybe understanding what I know, that people really need a helping hand. He made some comments on the presidential race to show that he wasn't that in tune with people in need. And what I think we've done a pretty good job in the state of Utah, because we're very charitable at caring for people that are truly down and out. We can do more. But our middle class, our workers, people out there just trying to make it, are having a rough time right now. And as a parent, I see that.
If you are elected, you would become the junior senator from Utah, a fairly unpopulated state, and you would be in the minority party in Congress. How effective can you be in that position?
Right. Well, assuming the Republicans maintain control, because there are several races up, as you know,
right,
then I think where I would be effective is just in the same way that Bill Orton was effective and Jim Matheson. I think it's critical for Utah to have a responsible Democrat in the federal delegation, because we're seeing the ping pong back and forth among the parties. We don't know who the president will be in 3 years. And I think to have someone who puts Utah first, who understands our issues, is running as a Utahn to solve problems, is a great thing for our delegation. So the first thing I would do is reach out to the others in the delegation. Senator Lee, our congressional leaders, and say, what do you need from the other side of the aisle? What have you guys been working on that you're frustrated with? And how can I be, how can I help you achieve what we need by bringing the other side on board. And I know that people in the state are frustrated. They're tired of the Democrats over here, the Republicans over here, nobody meeting in the middle. And, you know, I've learned, having worked back there in the same position where we had one Democrat at the time, Bill Orrin. At one point there were two, but I've learned how to navigate in that space. And I think, having lived and worked in this community, been involved in politics for most of my life, I think I'm respected by the other side, and I work well within my council. We don't always agree, and forging that coalition together is really what I think would benefit Utah.
If you had to describe where you were on the conservative to liberal spectrum here as a Democrat, where would you fall?
Just depends on the issue. I mean, there are issues that I've fought for that I think are a matter of fairness that might seem as more progressive. There's some things I've done, especially as we balance a budget and we have a pretty fiscally responsible team at Salt Lake County, and I'm so proud to be a part of that, where I would be more of a conservative. I'm a reformer. The first thing I did when I went to Salt Lake County Council was pass a gift ban. We didn't have a gift ban. Elected officials could take probably anything at the time, and we do now. I passed campaign finance reform to get the abuse out of the system. We need to do the same at the federal level. So I think I'm about common sense solutions, and you know, I don't really love labels because I think every issue has complexity. Some of my staff tease me that maybe it's a weakness, but I tend to really get deeply into policy and want to know the ins, the outs, and really take in every input and opinion that needs to be considered before making a decision.
You are in your second 6-year term as a Salt Lake County Council member. You are you hold a Master's of Public Administration from Harvard, very impressive. What would you consider to be some of your greatest achievements on the council so far?
Well, I take a lot of pride that we do balance our budget every year. And we've maintained a AAA bond rating, and that's a dramatic difference than the deficit increases that we see at the federal government, because it's money that we have to get somewhere, and we're paying high rates, which mean less services and higher taxes. So I think our fiscal responsibility collectively has been really, really key. I've worked tirelessly on the canyons and trying to find solutions to transportation. It's a very slow process, and that's one that I'm invested in locally. And then I think another challenge, but one that I have been working on a bipartisan basis, chairing a task force, co-chairing a task force with a Republican colleague, is the opioid crisis. And there's no easy solutions, but we're finally seeing more funding go into Salt Lake County, and we've got our project list to work through a number of issues surrounding that, because it really is devastating our community.
The Utah Democratic Party holds a great deal of interest in the turmoil, the legal battle, and the civil war going on in the Utah GOP right now. In that, if the Utah GOP actually kicks somebody out, a candidate out of the party for gathering signatures to get on the ballot, the Democratic Party in Utah is going to jump on that and try to get the Utah GOP kicked off the ballot.
Right.
How do you see this turmoil in the GOP actually winding up?
Well, I think that when they initiated the matter within their own caucus or within their Central Committee meeting, it ended up being quite a reach. And then, of course, the Democrats took advantage of that. But I just don't think there's any legal standing to kick anyone out. And I think it's clear, too, with the recent court decision that both channels to the ballot are legal, that the courts have ruled, and we're back to the acceptance of the Senate bill, the compromise that allows a two-track system. Right.
But at this point, there is an en banc ruling that people are hoping for that would wipe out SB 54 and kind of put all the power back into that small group in the Central Committee of the GOP in Utah.
Yeah.
How do you see this civil war actually playing out? What's going to happen in the Utah GOP, and how will it affect the Democrats here?
I think they're going to have to accept that there are two paths now. And I know that the diehards within the party really hold on to that idea of a very few deciding as opposed to going to a broader Republican vote. And I would imagine that the two tracks will remain. And you know, if they want to keep stirring it up, I don't think it helps their party. And you know, people say to me all the time, you know, the dominance of the Republican Party will have to shift back in some way at some time. And I'm starting to feel that. And, you know, I think having lived in other places, I consider myself on many issues a centrist. I don't feel that we will stay in the minority at the level that we are in right now. And I think it's absolutely in the best interest of our state, everyone in the state, to have more balance. And I think we've seen some abuse. So one thing that I bring to the table is some clarity on that, that I can defend any position I believe in, whether it end up being a more Democratic position or a Republican. I'm very aligned with the Democratic Party because I think over the years it has been compassionate, very fair. I don't buy that the Republican Party has been the fiscal conservative party, at least not since I've been governing. So, you know, fair enough to choose your, you know, place, and I have, but at the same time, neither party has all the answers, and it's my job to kind of figure it out for my own and speak what I think makes sense.
Is being a Utah Democrat a lonely proposition because of the numbers?
Yeah. No, I don't think it is lonely being a Democrat. I talk to people all the time who are very, very committed to their beliefs. I think I also talk to people who have been with the Republican Party in the past and say, it is not my party anymore. And I feel in this day and age, I'm happy where I am. I wouldn't want to be caught up in the local kind of twists and turns, and I certainly don't defend I can't think of anything I'm defending that's happening out of the presidency right now. So I feel pretty comfortable.
There may be a public perception out there that being a Democrat is not only lonely, but you don't really get much done because of the numbers are so overwhelmingly Republican in the state. But that, in fact, is not really true, is it?
Well, if you look at Salt Lake County, we're equally divided. And I think that's awesome, actually, because we have a Democratic mayor. Our sheriff is the first Latina woman elected, Democrat. Our DA is a Democrat. Then you have 5 Republicans on the county council and 4 Ds. So we end up working well together because you really do have each party with, you know, representation within that system. We don't see that at the Utah State Legislature, and we haven't had a statewide Democrat elected for some time. Now, if you were to send me to Congress, I'm in a position to be a reasonable voice for my party, certainly, but first and foremost for the people of Utah, and I'll be in a position to negotiate on behalf of the needs of Utahns. And you know, I joke a little bit that, you know, if Jenny Wilson ends up in the U.S. Senate, there's no fear that, you know, the Democrats are taking over, because I would be one of 6. And I would be in a good position to reach out to the Ron Wydens of Wyoming, or sorry, the Ron Wydens of Oregon. Ron Wyden is working with Republicans to get more dollars to the counties due to the large amount of money that's locked up with the federal land in those counties. So rural Utah would benefit from me there advocating for them within the Democratic Party.
You were the first female Salt Lake County council member elected to office. Are there enough women being represented in Utah government?
Well, unfortunately, the number's about 1 in 5 women to men in government. And we're seeing this year a really interesting thing in that there are thousands of women stepping up and running for office, from U.S. Senate down to local office throughout the nation. We're seeing more in Utah. You look back at our recent municipal election this past November, and we have several new women mayors, which is quite exciting, including a mayor from Provo, and a woman mayor in Provo now, which is great. So I think we're starting to see some progress, and one of the things that I'm trying to sort of point to in this campaign as I seek to become the first woman U.S. Senator from Utah is that it's really a great experience to be in this space, to go out and have a voice in the community. And I think sometimes women are not often confident enough, and they always think a little bit more than men before they, you know, throw their hat in the ring. And I'm trying to discourage that. I'm trying to say, yes, you have a voice, and it's pretty often that I, in a conversation with a woman who doesn't feel she's empowered, say, well, what do you care about? And she says, I care about my kids. What else do you care about? My family, making ends meet. We have an issue with my child in sports, and we can't afford the insurance, and I don't know what to do about that form. And these are real conversations. And I say, well, do you have solutions? And she certainly does. So if she has solutions and energy and is wanting to have more impact on the system, then I'm always saying, hey, there is, you know, at least vote, but please consider running for office.
Jenny Wilson, Democratic candidate for U.S. Senate from Utah. Thank you so much for being part of Three Questions.
Absolutely. I appreciated it.